East Tennessee's own WDVX. It's the feature at 5. This is Tony Lawson. It is the WDVX birthday at the Bijou. 25 years old here on November 5, and we're celebrating tonight. It's a very special night because Sam Bush is in the house tonight, the Sam Bush Band, and it's also another special day. One of WDVX's radio host from a few years back, John Hartford. John has a new... Sam has a new album out, and it's out today. Is that right? Sam Bush is here.
Just coming out today. Yeah, it really is. Yeah, it's been years in the making, and it's called Radio John, the songs of John Hartford. And Radio John was, if I understand correctly, that was a DJ name for him as a young man. And and the idea behind this record, well, actually, it will be a record. They're making vinyl again, huh? But it first comes out a CD. I guess next year, vinyl's taking a lot longer to process. The idea was just, there's 9 songs written by John Hartford, and during pandemic and what have you, I'd already started this idea, but I ended up playing everything myself on 9 tunes. And then on the 10th tune, which is a song called Radio John, it's written by John Pennell and I. Now, Pennell is known to some as, he was the original bass player in Union Station before it was called Allison Krauss in Union Station, when Allison was just a teenager. So John is, and he's written, of course, some of the great songs Allison has done over the years. And we got to talking about Hartford, and I was looking for someone. I had this idea about Radio John. Oh, and by the way, on the back of the very first Newgrass Revival album is a poem, and at the bottom, a poem about the revival. I think it was called The Arrival of Newgrass Revival, and it's signed Radio John, Topanga Canyon. So there was some reason John was contractually bound from being able to sign his own name, some sort of, I guess, his record contract. But so Radio John wrote that poem, and so I've always, and I know Norman Blake used to call him Radio John sometimes when I'd be around them in the airplane band. And I was thinking about, got to thinking about the phrase Radio John, and I'd come up with some phrases and maybe a bit of a little chorus or two we could think of. But I called John Pennell, and he's from Illinois, so Hartford was very important to John Pennell as well. So we started writing literally we wrote it over the phone in 2020, our FaceTiming and talk about this and that. And we just tried to talk about many of the things that he was good at. We couldn't cover them all in one song. Right. Now, when we did actually do that, but it was literally 20 verses long. And we just, it's still over the song, and as it is a little over 5 minutes long. And but talking about his steamboat captain, fiddler, dancer, banjo picker, songwriter, singer,
radio host.
Yeah, we talk about that. We talk about him being on 690 KSTO. Yes. And so it got started because Lynn and I go down to Florida. And I like to take some kind of little recording machine and instruments. And so if we can sit at the beach for a few weeks, I actually get more of a chance to get reacquainted with my instruments and just think more about music. And because we're not at home dealing with business as much. Mm-hmm. And so I think one day, thinking back, I was trying to make up a tune or something, and I might have realized, that sounds kind of like a Hartford tune. And then I started thinking about John songs that I loved. And I was fortunate growing up around Nashville to see Hartford on, pretty sure it was the Wilburn Brothers show one day, and a guy playing the banjo with an Earl Scruggs style roll and singing, and I'd never seen anybody do that. And I didn't catch his name. A few weeks later, my dad and I were down in Nashville and went in the Ernest Tubb record shop and found there's a record, and that's the guy. And I see that his name is John Hartford. So I bought that record, and I ended up buying all his early RCA records. And that's back when he was a songwriter, that was just this phenomenal songwriter.
Gentle on My Mind, yeah.
To me, on par with Chris Christopherson and Tom T. Hall and Mickey Newberry and people like that. It was that good, and so as I kept thinking but one day I got frustrated. I couldn't seem to get my machines working, and I never could. I'm not a good engineer. Never tried to be. And so I got a friend of mine who's a fine musician down there named Donnie Sundel. I told him about it. He's an R&B musician. I played with him one night. And he said, "What are you up to, in daytime?" And I said, "I'm trying to record this. I'm trying to do some recording, but I can't work my machine." And he said, "Well, I bet I know what to do. I'll come over tomorrow." So the next day he came over with an entire Pro Tools rig and mics and preamps and even another bass and what have you. And so then once now I'm really recording these things, or Donnie is recording them professionally, then I realized, well, maybe I can stack some instruments together and make some tunes. And so I started thinking about all these great old love songs John did. Some of these tunes I was fortunate in the 70s to record on with him, and like In Tall Buildings, Granny Won't You Smoke Some Marijuana. I played and sang harmony on those. There were a couple of instrumentals that I played, one called Down and one called John McLaughlin, named after the great jazz guitarist. Because yes. John and I used to listen a lot to John McLaughlin together, going down the highway and listen to the Birds of Fire by the Mahavishnu Orchestra. And John found some chord progressions, and he said, "These sound like the kind of thing John McLaughlin plays." So he just simply called it John McLaughlin, which was always even funnier to me. So all of a sudden this became a reality when it was starting to be professionally recorded, that I could make this into something maybe. Then came the lockdown of 2020, so now Rick Wheeler, engineer at the time with our band, had his own overdubbing place at his house, so I would go over to Rick's, and the two of us sat for many hours and worked on these tapes and really worked on them. And now I started honing them into something and became reality. Because really, my original intent was to just sort of make versions of them to show the band, and then the band would play them better. But that didn't really present itself, and so that's how it all got going. And so, as Lynn would call it, this is my love letter to John Hartford's music.
I love it. I love this record and the songs you chose.
And it was maybe ones that you hadn't heard other people do.
Yes.
And of course, I really didn't. And I recorded "Gentle on My Mind" once with John, and I played on one of those versions. And so, there's great versions out there of that song. Many, many, many.
That was a good one because you had so many other hot pickers on that version that you played on.
Yeah. And so, yeah, right. So really, I guess this might be the first tribute to John Hartford that ever came out that doesn't include "Gentle on My Mind." But the world knows that song.
This is Sam Bush, and the new record is called Radio John. It's a tribute to John Hartford, and John was such a kind person. He was very kind to me, and I was playing with some stuff for Sam when he walked in from a show that John Hartford used to do on WDVX called the Anderson County Mobile Home Companion. And I am hoping to goodness that we're going to be sharing some of this with folks here sometime down the road, because Sam doing this record for Radio John, you're just opening up the gate here for something like a John Hartford radio show to come out. My goodness.
And here, there's no question. But yeah, it actually comes out today. We're sitting and talking. You just played me some old, well, I still call them tapes, but you just played me some old tapes of John, and it's, and I miss him, but his music lives on. I feel like he's around always.
We told a wonderful story in the camper one day, and it led to why I asked him to do if he wanted to do a radio show. It blew me away when he said yes, and if I can name it. And he was so gracious enough to do those and just send us cassettes to the radio station. And he told me those stories of him being fired for playing Earl Scruggs instrumentals behind the newscast in the station in Missouri where he worked. and a rebel right there. He was meant for radio, so he had an incredible love for radio, and I'm so glad you entitled this Radio John, and I think that title song is such an important track if folks want to find out more about John Hartford, and much more than the musician. So much, he was incredibly talented. I've never seen someone do some things that John could do at one time.
Well, when he first went solo, of course, it wasn't quite as interesting for me as it was when because I used to get to hear the band we called the Aerial Plane Band with Tut and Norman and Vassar, and but then again, now I could really dig in, listen to him and these songs. I just remember one day he said, "I'm learning to dance. I'm going to start dancing while I play." And I thought, wow, that seems pretty impossible. And of course, to the rest of us, it would be to me, and it is to me.
And sing and play and dance at the same time.
And his timing, John had tremendous timing in his. And then one, this is his way of handwriting. One day he decided he was going to learn to do more of a calligraphy style handwriting, and they're good old Southern beautiful hand, longhand, and because he always printed, he had a unique way of printing on his early records. He would do his own liner notes and stuff, and I always loved that. And so it was just, or when he told me about he was going to get his, steamboat pilot license and what all that entailed, and the amount of what he'd have to go through to get that seemed impossible. So, he was a pretty unique character.
And he could write with his right hand forward and his left hand backwards at the same time and hold it up. And you could never tell the difference. He did that with a friend of mine's name. He wrote her name forward with his right hand, backwards with his left hand at the same time, and then just held it up. We were blown away.
that one I didn't know.
We were blown away. Tell me about the first time you met John Hartford.
Bean Blossom, Indiana, 1971. The band I was in, Bluegrass Alliance, and we were kind of progressive, and the band at the time was Evo Walker, Lonnie Pierce, Courtney Johnson, and Tony Rice and me, and we played Bean Blossom, Bill Monroe's festival, Bean Blossom, Indiana, and also on that bill was, in fact, John and the Aerial Plane Band with Tut, Vassar, and Norman. So that was really a progressive sound, and they didn't carry a bass live. They never had a live bass player. Right. And so we got to meet there after John and the band just really blew people away on a Saturday night. And we went back to a campsite and jammed about 2 hours. Wow. And then that's when it occurred to me that this Hartford fella could, no one that I ever met loved jamming more than him, loved more than playing his instruments or playing with others. And so that jam session went on the rest of his life. And so that led to when Tut Taylor was the first one to leave that group, he left to sort of manage John for a little while. But Tut called me and asked me if I wanted to replace him in the band, that I would have joined up with Vassar and Norman and John. And it just wasn't the right time. We had just started Newgrass Revival, and I was so in love with the band and the guys, and I just couldn't leave. And John understood that. And of course, and it was after that, we went on to make our record. John wrote the liner notes. We had the same agent and manager, so we played. It's funny. I've never really used the word touring. We go on the road. We don't tour.
The song's on the road, right?
Right. So we went out and we ended up doing a lot of shows with John. And there was this one in particular where he we were playing about 2.5 weeks, something like that, almost every night. And of course, we're driving in vans, and John's flying everywhere by himself, carrying a guitar and a fiddle and a banjo and a suitcase, which is a big duffel bag. So he had all this stuff strapped on him. He'd go through airports. And then one day he said, "Hey, you mind if I just ride with you guys?" And we were thrilled, of course. And And then he said, we told him, yeah, you can buy the gas if you want.
Yeah.
But anyway, John would end up taking his turn driving, and so we got to know each other a little better after that.
Oh.
So that led to me getting to record with him on a couple of his Flying Fish records, a few of them, and we just always stayed in touch. Every once in a while, he'd call me. I'd augment a group he might have for TV and something, and that's where everybody in the world could see how stupid I look in a derby.
Well, tell me something. Tell me, what do you think John Hartford's impact has been over the years? While he was alive, and also now, with the younger players. How do you?
I just know the impact at the time when he was current, especially in the early '70s. He was still playing somewhat progressively, and I just think he was, I made the statement once about that there wouldn't be any newgrass music without the Aeroplane album, that it was that influential because you had the cream of the crop of players that would be influential and has proven over the years to be, especially Norman Blake and Vassar Clements. Mm. And John's banjo picking too, because when John, before that, had been on the Glenn Campbell show for years, and they'd have the picking and the picking segment in the middle with him and Glenn sitting there, and he and Glenn and I had a tape recorder, a reel-to-reel tape recorder that I could plug in the back of my TV. A buddy rigged up an output jack where I could just plug the jack right in the back of the TV. I don't know where all these tapes went, but I had a tape of John and Glenn doing Great Balls of Fire with a bluegrass tempo, and the very kind of chromatic lick John played on the banjo. Courtney Johnson learned that, and so it's no coincidence that the Newgrass Revival on our first album we did Great Balls of Fire, and we were totally influenced by John and Glenn Campbell to do it that way. You could say we're influenced. We copied them. Mm-hmm. We copied their version.
Right.
So little did he know when they were sitting and playing that for their own enjoyment and turning a miracle into this picking. And because Glenn Campbell was a fine guitarist, that young bluegrassers like me were just sitting there eating this up. Those like me that loved progressive bluegrass like the Osborne Brothers, and the Dillards and Jim and Jess and the Country Gentlemen, and so those were highly influential. Getting to see him, and it was encouraging seeing people play the bluegrass style instruments on CBS. Mm-hmm. As far as the way he is influenced now, modern day, I'm not sure I would know how far reaching his influence goes. Mm-hmm. Other than it still influences me.
And there's a big festival in Indiana at Bill Monroe's place, the John Hartford Festival there every year. And that's, after John passed away, shortly after he passed away, I remember interviewing you, and I interviewed John Cowan about a few things, and I asked each one of you to give me a John Hartford story. And Cowan's story was, when he joined the Newgrass Revival, he came at it from a rock and roll side. And he was like, I didn't know what the band was about. I didn't ask Sam. I said, what is this? What's this band? And he said that you gave him a copy of Aeroplane and a little something else to go home, listen to this album. That's just what the band's about. I thought that was a great story.
Well, and on Aeroplane album, that's Randy Scruggs playing electric bass. Yeah. And I thought it was wonderful.
Yeah. Now, I was very fortunate in 1980 to see the Newgrass Revival with Courtney and with Curtis Birch and you guys in Johnson City. Uh-huh. And this was the first time I saw John Hartford live. This was at a theater that they tore down there on, I guess it was in downtown Johnson City, just up the street from the Down Home. And it's the only night I remember them.
Theater, do you remember?
I cannot remember.
It wasn't the Tivoli, was it?
I cannot remember what it was.
But they're actually... And I was looking around for photos to go with this album package, and miraculously, we were playing in Kent, Ohio last year, and a person came up and laid these photos on me at the end, and it was a picture of us playing at that very place you're talking about.
Wow. That was the only time they had a show in there for years. Only time I recall it, and I started college there in '76. They were using
Wow.
that theater for other purposes
Yeah.
at the time.
I see.
Like this Bijou was used for some of those purposes
Yeah.
in the past history of it too. So, but man, it's good to be here with you. It's good to be with you and talk about John Hartford, man.
It is. I appreciate it.
And,
Glad to be here. Yeah, we're going to get to play some of these songs tonight.
and thanks for doing this record.
Well, I'm happy to. And again, it was just literally a labor of love, and nothing I didn't plan on doing this. It just sort of happened out of really me just trying to cut some songs by myself and with my friends Donnie and Rick trying to, you know, to get it engineered and allowing me to sit there and for them to have the patience of me sitting there and doing it over and over and over and over until I got it right.
This is Sam Bush. The new record is called Radio John, and Sam's our feature today on the Feature at 5, and we're going to play some tracks from this new record. And later on tonight, Sam and his band are live here at the Bijou. It's the WDVX birthday at the Bijou, celebrating 25 years. It's been sold out for a while, and just can't say enough about all this stuff.
Thank you for having me. I mean, and it's a pleasure. WDVX has been good to me over the years.
Well, you've been a huge part of what you were inspired what we started to do because your music needed to be out there.
Do I have a memory of we were playing somewhere around here, and you had the truck,
the camper,
the camper, and I think our sound man hit this one button that muted the whole thing as we were trying. I think you were going live, and somehow he muted the whole thing for a while.
The camper. We had 3 studios in it, and John visited with us on that one Saturday morning in '98, and he just loved it. And people like him and Chip Taylor and more would visit with us, and they fell in love with DVX that way.
Yeah.
And they just wanted to keep coming back and keep being involved with our radio station. And what can you say about that?
It's good to have DVX because you and others like you around the country help people in our area of music and area of show business, if you call it. You're our great ally. I thank you.
Thank you, Sam Bush.